Can do.
Yeah, people are talking. Okay.
Yeah, so open ended, don't know where you land, but I'm kind of having fun with that one. Okay. Let's do the roll call.
Before we do, if we
Yeah.
could please swear in new board member Belmont, thank you for joining us this evening. Welcome.
Thank you. It really is. If you could raise your right hand, and repeat after me, but after I say your name. I
Howard Buchanan,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend
that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies,
against all enemies,
foreign and domestic,
foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith
that I will bear true faith
and allegiance to the Constitution
and allegiance to the Constitution
of the United States
of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully
and that I will well and faithfully
discharge the duties upon which I am about to enter.
discharge the duties upon which I am about to.
Well done.
Okay, and with that roll call, San Mateo County,
Dave Pine here.
San Mateo County, Atherton, Belmont,
Tom McEwen, President of Belmont.
Ridley,
Colleen Mackin.
Burlingame, Homa, Kansas City,
Rod McWall,
East Palo Alto,
Carlos Romero,
Foster City,
Sam Henry,
Half Bay, Hillsborough,
That's the guys there.
Los Banos, Menlo Park,
That's again.
okay,
Tiger Jazz, Big Six.
Tola Valley,
Craig Taylor.
Redwood City,
Over to
thank you. San Bruno,
Marty Medina.
San Carlos,
John Dugan.
San Mateo, South San Francisco,
James Pullman.
and Woodside. Okay, thank you. We have a forum.
Okay, thank you. Is there any public comment? Public comment in the room? Is there any public comment online?
Um. Gary Carter, do you have a public comment that you wish to make? There's a note in the chat. If you, Gary, if you would like to make a public comment, if you'll please raise your hand in the Zoom application. Really, anyone who'd like to make a public comment? Doesn't look like it.
I'll close public comment. The next item is an action to set the agenda and approve the consent agenda. Does anyone wish to pull anything from the consent agenda? No. The board wishes to, anybody from the public wish to pull anything from the consent agenda? I don't see any requests. There is one change to the agenda, which is item 8, selection of the board chair and vice chair. There was some confusion around that because we're in the process of amending policy 16, which governs the selection of the vice chair and the chair, as well as it's being expanded to address a whole series of things. It isn't changing the procedure for the selection of the chair and the vice chair. So it was the intention that we would do that tonight, but that wasn't made clear. So we're going to continue that and have that at the beginning of the agenda in March.
Just to provide clarity, for consent agenda item number 1. Someone on staff inadvertently included titles to minutes that were already approved. So the only minutes that actually need to be approved are from the January 25th meeting, last month's meeting.
Okay, great, thank you. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda, the consent items and set the agenda? So moved. Thank you, Harvey.
Second.
Thank you, Sam. We don't have anyone online.
Right.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you. We will move on. The first item on the agenda is the chair report. I don't have anything to report tonight. So that moves right on to the CEO report.
Well, gosh, I was gonna kick off by, thanking you for your years of service as chair, but I guess we'll wait. Do that next month?
That's your,
Okay. I mean, we can start with gratitude tonight. We can start with gratitude next month.
let's choose one.
All right. I think it would be great to wait until everybody's here. So
Okay.
if that works for you.
No problem.
Okay, so I have a number of things just to update you on, a little grab bag of items. You will all remember that at your last board meeting, you made kind of a historic decision to freeze rates at 2023 levels. And that turns out to have been a great decision for lots and lots of reasons, including the fact that it's been a significant benefit to our customers. And we've had a lot of very good press and very good feedback from that decision. Did want to let you know that we have a number of communication channels to push that information out, including a number of press articles that have covered it. We have a social media campaign underway right now. We had talked about potentially doing a direct mail piece, but we took it back to our marketing team and determined that it was not the most efficient way. It was A, expensive, and B, those tend to hang around for a while, as Gwen likes to say, it has a long tail. And so, and the situation may change here in the next couple of months. So we're doing all kinds of other things to get the word out, a lot of email and segmented communications, but we aren't going to do a separate direct mail. Just wanted to close the loop on that. The minutes, so apologies, I've gotten a few questions about the minutes. Apologies if it's been a little confusing. Nellie is in the process of doing massive catch up on the minutes from, some of it was from last year. Just got completely sidetracked with all the things that were going on, and thankfully we now have Brianna and there's space to catch up. So be looking for those. And then also to let you know, one of the things that we'll be talking about when policy 16 hopefully comes before you next month is a shift to action minutes. So giving you just a small heads up that rather than reading, like frankly, a novel, what everybody said, now that we have peak agenda, there will be action minutes, and then the person can click into the agenda item and at a certain minute, go watch it in the video. So it's now all synced up, which allows us to free up administrative time and do much more efficient. David's giving me an eyebrow over here, so we may have a chat.
No, not at all. I'm very happy.
Yeah.
We used to have, the minutes used to be much less detailed than they are now.
Yeah, they're very
Yeah.
detailed now. So we're gonna, just giving you a heads up that that'll come before you next month as part of a package of the policy 16. So moving into upcoming, as Rick noted, we are working on a much expanded policy 16 that essentially enshrines a lot of what we already do. It's standard operating procedures for board and committee operations. And so talking about the difference between the standing committees and ad hoc committees and committees of staff and term limits and all the things that we do in practice, but haven't actually beforehand been written down. So we're working on that right now. With that will come some cleanup items in the JPA agreement so that everything matches and is aligned. We've identified a few things already. We had a question about clearing up some language about the weighted voting, which we'll take a look at and make sure that that's super clear to everybody. And that is likely to be coming back to you. We have to release it for 30-day comment. So that'll come back for approval in April, just so you understand the process there. I have begun the year-long journey of council briefings. Kicking off in the city of Brisbane last week, which was just terrific. Thank you, Colleen.
Thank you.
For hosting, and I think it went well. There's some dates up here. We are working with Mark Hirschman to fill out the rest of the dance card for the remainder of the year, and I hope to see all of you and your councils coming up this year. Okay, a lot going on at Cal CCA. The biggest news to report is yesterday we had lobby day in Sacramento. It was the first one sort of back in person since I think 2019, so pre-pandemic. And it was a grand success. There were about 70 people in the delegation representing all the different CCAs. I went up with Shalini and Mark. Tip of a hat to Mark for working with Cal CCA to put all of this together, because as you could see, we were from morning till night, going from meeting to meeting to meeting, met with all of our local legislators and a number of key leadership in the legislature. The key issues, you won't be super surprised, were reliability and RA concerns, which we've talked about many, many times, affordability and rates. And I will say, and I will invite Mark to comment here in a minute, that the frustration was palpable all day yesterday around this rates issue. And maybe as a little sideline, I don't know if you guys saw the article in the Mercury News this morning, that PG&E posted a profit of nearly 25% in 2023 over 2022. And the year before that, 12.5%. So it's in the Mercury News today. I encourage you guys to take a look at it, but it's like front and center of what everybody is super frustrated. So the ability for us to go up and say, listen, we heard the frustration and we responded quickly and we frozen rates, that registered very well with our legislators yesterday. Grid upgrade delays, we'll hear more about that tonight from Roy, but that's another big issue that is gonna put us all in a backlog to achieving state goals, frankly. All right, so it was super successful and I do appreciate all the team for putting it together. Next up for us at Cal CCA, I am participating in the partners briefing on March 7th. That basically is speaking to all of the membership, talking about what PCE is doing that's new and innovative and giving them a sense of where we're at with procurement and all that. The following week, I'll be back in Sacramento giving a briefing for new legislators, talking about the history of CCA, how it works, and what we're up to. And then, I think you all know this, but Cal CCA's annual conference is April 16 to 18. All board members are invited to attend, and we will help you do that. So if you would like to go, it's in San Jose, and just let Nellie know and we'll take care of that. All right, I think next up, Mark, you have a quick legislative update and then we'll wrap up. Yes, yes.
Is there a way we could include people like Phil Ting in this list next time, or Scott Wiener? Because Daly City's in this weird limbo, where we share boundaries. And I get it, we have representation from this part of the county, but if there's ways that we can get advocacy for North County as well.
Absolutely. And Scott Wiener, we did not meet, our group of 3 did not meet with him, but other folks in the delegation did.
Okay.
So what was on the slide was just our PCE team, but
All right.
it expanded.
Thanks.
Thank you, I
And,
appreciate
and
it.
I know we've met with Phil Ting in the past.
Yeah. Not sure why, Mark might be able to comment on why he was not on the list.
So we deferred to San Francisco to meet with their legislators and worked with Silicon Valley and San Jose to meet with our shared legislators. And so that was the decision was made as to how best to spend our limited resources and available time at this juncture. So also wanted to update you on a few things that have occurred since the packet was prepared. As mentioned in the packet, Senator Mike McGuire of Marin, his district stretches from Marin to the Oregon border along the coast, was named pro tem on February 5th. He did not make a lot of changes to committee assignments and otherwise, but in those instances where he vacated seats or others were appointed to his leadership team and therefore vacated seats in committees, he did make appointments of significance. Was his replacement on the Senate Energy Committee. He replaced himself with Senator Limon from the Santa Barbara area, and his position on Budget Subcommittee number 2, which deals with resources, environmental protection, and energy. He named Senator Catherine Blakespear of also of Santa Barbara. I wrote down Santa Barbara. I don't think that.
She's in North San Diego.
North San Diego, right. to that post. He did not, as I mentioned, he did not make a lot of other significant appointments to energy or related committees. Senator Bradford continues as chair of the Senate Energy Committee. One significant change he did make is appointing to the chair position on the very powerful Senate Appropriations Committee, Senator Ana Caballero, who represents Los Banos in the state legislature. Interestingly, at the same time those changes were being made, Speaker Rivas in the Assembly added a seat to the Assembly Utilities Committee and appointed Rick Zabur of West Hollywood to fill that new position. He also added, the Speaker did a seat on the Assembly Budget Subcommittee on Climate Crisis, Resources, Energy, and Transportation, and appointed Assemblymember Kadi Petrie Norris to that position. She is also now the chair of the Assembly Utilities Committee, so that was an interesting appointment there too. The deadline to introduce bills was last Friday, and as anticipated, many hundreds came in at the last minute. All told, there were 2,124 bills introduced by the deadline. That compares to 2632 last year. Usually, this is not atypical. Usually there are more bills introduced in the first year of the two-year session. Of those 2,124 bills, 1,505 are in the Assembly, 619 in the Senate, and almost a third, 674, are what we call spot bills or placeholder bills. These are bills where they file it under a certain topic and maybe with a limited amount of information, but the details will come at a later date, if at all. And lastly, to feed off of what Sean said regarding things of interest going on in Sacramento, just this week, the Legislative Analyst's Office came out with their revised projection for the state budget deficit, and it increased significantly. They came out with a figure of about 58 billion late last year. They have upped that now to 73 billion, and that compares to roughly 38 billion that the governor had projected in his budget issued in January. So that was in combination with so much discussion about rates in Sacramento. As Sean indicated, I think legislators were delighted to hear that we were actually coming to share good news about how we're affecting rates and their constituents and ratepayers. Happy to take any questions.
Any question? Yes.
Question
Sam.
for Sean, on your lobby day, you mentioned that you have relayed the frustration on the rates. Have you heard back the same thing from the legislators? And if you did they share any course of action that they might be looking at?
I will ask my colleagues to also chime in. There was nothing offered in terms of how they would plan to deal with the rates. All of them were just visibly frustrated by it. And so, and I think that also goes to, you know, a bit of frustration, frankly, with the PUC and their process for rates and rate oversight and all of that. So unfortunately, there were not a lot of solutions offered yesterday, but sort of at least shared understanding of what's going on and what's broken and what does need to be addressed.
Thank you.
That part of it was productive.
Any other questions? Dave?
A quick question on the Cal CPA conference in San Jose. Will there be any events for elected officials?
Yes.
We
So
wanna
PCE is
make
gonna
sure we get that.
sponsor, I think it'll be the third year, second, whatever.
At least,
second or
no,
third?
at least the third,
Third, yeah.
maybe more.
There is an elected officials lunch on the second day,
Okay,
where all the CCA board members come together. I know that Rick has attended many now, all of them.
I don't know, at least three,
So we're co-sponsoring that again.
but quite a number of us here attended last year. It was in San Diego, and it's a worthwhile conference to go to. I encourage everyone who has the time to go, because you really learn things, and the interaction between CCAs at the board level is very rare. I mean, we talk to each other, but we don't talk to other board members, and this is the only opportunity we really have to do that. And I mean, we were all very strategic in the course of launching this agency and focusing this agency on the very strategic goals we focused it on. And it's very important to share those perspectives with other board members of the other CCAs. Everyone isn't the same, and some have different perspectives that are very helpful and useful. We learned a lot last year, particularly around the whole finance option that we hadn't seriously considered, and others were very engaged with it, and it had generated huge returns for them. So, and we really learned that at that conference. So I strongly encourage anyone who has the time to go, and even if you only go one day, I think it's worth it. Yes, please.
Yeah, the PUC, do we have any particular relationship or insight with them, or do we understand, are we involved in overseeing that process, or at least understanding it tangentially?
We do.
Yeah.
I mean, we have good relationships, productive relationships through Jeremy Wan, who's the Director of Regulatory Policy for PCE, and the whole team, Doug, Matthew, Jenna, Susanna, and now Shalini Swaroop as our new COO, comes to us as the former policy director at MCE, where she was engaged with. So we have good relationships. It doesn't mean that that our concerns are always heard or considered. Maybe I'll just leave it there. So
Well, we have regular meetings,
we do,
at least I'd say once a year, right? With each member
each
of the
commissioner,
commission,
yep,
of the commission.
we do, just to go over key issues, and then we're in touch with them on a regular basis on critical issues around RA and some of the other, the issues shift. But we do have a robust relationship. And Cal CCA runs the ball on a lot of that on behalf of Strength in Numbers, all the CCAs, and then PCE has its own relationship, and every once in a while, we will have our own filings and things like that, separate from LCCA.
Thank you.
Okay, all right, then, last up, thank you, Mark.
And John, I'm sorry, Jonathan, and if you go to that conference, some of those commissioners are there.
Okay.
So I happened to sit on a couple of tables where there were two commissioners, and we can speak in detail, but certainly you will have some access, and it's so close that I think particularly the new board members should really go. I mean, I learned a lot. I'm glad that folks suggested I go.
And they used to never show up
Yeah.
at our conferences, so it's, the amount of time we got yesterday, with the number of legislators we got yesterday, and the fact that, we are a growing concern that matters. It's really kind of amazing to see the difference in 10 years' time. Okay, just really quickly, we've hired some rock stars, one of whom has already joined us, two of whom are going to be joining us soon. One woman I'll point out, Yana Land, is our new Associate Director of Innovation and Strategy starting March 1st. She's going to be working with Shalini on a number of aspects of what we're calling PCE 2.0. The first of which is revenue diversification and looking at filing for energy efficiency administrator status at the PUC and possibly getting some earmarks through the federal government, et cetera. So those three are starting, and then we had a series of new promotions. One I'll call out is Kirsten Andrews Schwind, who you all know has been here almost from the beginning. And she now has expanded her role to include not only community relations, but climate equity. As you know, she's been very involved in our DEAI process and wants to become more deeply involved at the state in issues around climate equity. So congratulations to all of our team. And last but not least, we have positions. It seems like we always have positions open. Eventually, hopefully that'll all slow down. And then here's the meetings for next month. With that, we'll turn it back over.
Okay, let me see if there's any public comment on the CEO report. I don't see any public comment in the room. I don't see any online. We'll move on to the next item, which is the Community Advisory Committee report. And our chair, Cheryl Schaff, is online. Are you gonna give the report, Cheryl?
I am, thank you.
Absolutely.
All right, good evening, Honorable Chair DeGolia and members of the board. The CAC met February 8th and was excited to hear details of the new turnkey home electrification service when Alejandro Posada, Programs Manager, Customer Programs, shared about the timeline, scope, and partners for the service. Members asked if there are enough experienced heat pump water heater installers to meet demand. And Alejandro reported that the number of contractors familiar with electrification has increased. Members asked if PCE will work with jurisdictions to improve their permitting processes for electrification. And Blake Hershaft, Program Manager Buildings, assured us that you will. The committee passed this recommendation. The CAC enthusiastically recommends that the board approve the turnkey home electrification service and urges PCE to act expeditiously to implement the program. The CAC recommends that the emergency replacement program install only electric water heaters where feasible. Members of the public asked several things. What information about homes will be collected if the program will add contractors as demand for electrification increases? If the program will pay prevailing wage for each craft utilized, and who will ensure compliance, and how PCE will build trust with customers to encourage participation. Blake Hershaft shared updates to PCE's model reach code, including an energy performance approach and air quality approach. When member Kathleen Goforth asked if updated model codes will apply to existing buildings, Blake said PCE is working to include existing building measures as options under both approaches. Phil Kobernick, Senior Programs Manager, Transportation, reviewed his completed EV managed charging pilot. Members discussed opportunities and challenges of scaling participation in the program, and Kathleen Goforth recommended marketing to increase awareness of the EV customer rate. Our committee passed this recommendation. The CAC recommends that the board approve the implementation and growth of the EV managed charging program. The CAC encourages the public to sign up for the program through the PCE website. We heard brief updates from working groups focusing on local solar and storage programs, DEAI, and education initiatives. This completes my report. What questions may I answer for you?
Any questions for anybody on the board? I don't see any questions, Cheryl.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The next item on the agenda is an action item to consider and approve a 3-year contract with Franklin Energy in an amount not to exceed $26 million for the implementation of a turnkey electrification installation service for a single-family home.
Hi, good evening, Board of Directors. My name is Alejandro Posada. I'm one of the program managers in the programs team. I oversee our residential building electrification programs. And tonight I'll be talking about the single-family turnkey electrification installation service, specifically the contract year that we're proposing after going to the Community Advisory Committee and the Executive Committee this month, and with the recommendation to move forward here at the board to seek approval of the contract. Okay, so this is a summary of the request. We're requesting delegating authority to the CEO to execute a 3-year agreement with Franklin Energy for the implementation of the turnkey installation service for single-family homes. The contract amount would be for an amount not to exceed $26 million, but to be clear, only $24 million of that would be from Peninsula Clean Energy funds. I'll talk about more in detail where the other $2 million come from, but just to summarize it, it's from anticipated funds from Menlo Park, $2 million that they, part of funds that they have received from the California Energy Commission to do a community-wide electrification project. So that's pending an agreement and going to their council, but we do anticipate that, so that's why we included it in the overall contract amount here. So what I'll cover today is for some context on our programs and also where this fits into our building electrification efforts, our existing programs. Then cover what our focus will be this year for building electrification, specifically in the residential sectors. This entire presentation is really for residential programs. And then sewn into the turnkey installation service, specifically the contract here with Franklin Energy. So this chart that you have probably seen before just shows the program's portfolio. Our team is responsible for building decarbonization or electrification, transportation electrification, and also distributed energy resources such as solar and battery programs. In the building side of things, the ways that we have addressed mainly new buildings have been through reach codes and policy efforts. In existing buildings, we have had incentive programs that help residents move away from fossil fuel appliances in the home. And we have operated some incentive programs for the past 3 years or so in some small way. So per the board direction at the 2022 board retreat, staff presented a decarbonization feasibility assessment and plan for 2035. And that report showed that we need to rapidly scale building electrification to really meet our decarbonization goals. And it also demonstrated that we're best positioned to affect change in small residential sector that defined as single family homes or small multi-unit buildings. But the contract I'll be talking about is specifically for single family homes. The report also showed that we just needed the following principles to succeed, which is flexible incentives, high touch support for residents, and then links to financing. So when we went to the executive committee, we didn't have this slide and we got some feedback about wanting to know where we stand. So this is the state of the building electrification market in the residential sector, the small residential sector. Just to show really how far we have to go in terms of decarbonizing the built environment. So just starting from the top left, we estimate that only 1% of single family homes in PC service territory have taken a major home electrification step, and that's major meaning water heating or space heating. That's more easier for us to estimate and have data on. This doesn't really include if you get an electric dryer and things like that. But in terms of the major appliances, so the ones that contribute the most to methane gas emissions in the homes, which is water heaters and space heaters or furnaces, we estimate that 12,000 water heaters are replaced in our territory per year, and 7,000 space heaters are replaced per year. So based on 2023 rebate data, which in 2023 saw the most growth in our programs, in our incentive programs. So really probably 80% of our rebate data is just from 2023. Based on that data, only 5% of water heaters replaced last year were electrified to heat pumps. So we really have a long way to go. We've made a bit more progress on space heaters. About 15% are estimated to be heat pump electric space heaters as opposed to gas furnaces, but we still have ways to go. Okay, so now covering more of our existing incentive programs. So this is what we currently have for residents. The top two are programs that are available to all residents, so they're not income qualified. Rebates and loans, both programs are for heat pump water heaters and heat pump space heating and air conditioning systems or HVAC systems. We've been offering the loan program for about 1.5 years. We've been offering heat pump HVAC rebates for about 1.5 years. Heat pump water heater rebates we've had for about 3 years, but at the beginning they were small and limited, and we really seen the most amount of growth in program in the past 1.5 years. And then both of these programs are currently active now. The third program at the bottom here is our home upgrade program. So this is our direct install program, which has been for the past 2 years or so, installing electrification equipment. So either water heater, an electric dryer, or an electric induction stove in income qualified homeowners' homes at no cost to them. So it's a free service for income qualified homeowners, defined as those having income below 80% of the average median income. This program, with our current administrator, we have a contract that's will expire at the end of June. And for about the past 5 months or so, it has been closed. So we currently have a wait list up on our website, but right now it's not currently open. And the contract here that we're proposing is partly an extension of this program. So it's serving those that have been served through this program, but it's really kind of an expansion of what we'll be offering. Then this demonstrates the participants and also the appliances that we have installed. So the rebate and loan programs, about 1,800 homes have participated in those programs. And the home upgrade program, again, the income qualified program, we will serve a little over 300 once this current contract is up. Right now, we're about 280 And then this shows the number of appliances installed, mainly water heaters and HVAC, because that's really what the focus is for the rebates and the loan. So the program that's available to all residents, and then the dryers and inductions have all been through the home upgrade program. And then at the bottom, it shows the total estimated greenhouse gas emission savings from these installations.
If anyone has a question, there's a lot of data. Because they're, in order to introduce this Franklin contract, they're giving all the update about where we are in the home electrification program. So if anyone has a question as we go through it, don't hesitate to raise your hand.
Thank you. Yes.
That's it.
How are you counting the replacements? Is that people who've got through PCE or?
These numbers?
Yes.
Yes, these are the number, so the appliances installed, it's a combination of rebates and also homes that we have done directly through the no-cost program. So it's combined.
So individuals, so homeowners who've done this, for example, put in an electric dryer or the induction cooktop would not
be
by
counted
themselves
here.
would not be counted.
That's correct. Yeah, these are appliances that ECE has supported in installing. Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to confirm that the dryers we're installing are heat pump dryers, is that correct?
They're not all heat pump dryers, no. We are installing some electric resistance dryers. Both are measures, but we have installed electric resistance dryers. I know that heat pumps are more efficient, but just based on some of the research that we did when we first launched the program, we wanted to keep both measures available because heat pump dryer have just a different experience from like a clothes drying perspective. They may take longer, and so we have installed electric resistance dryers replacing gas.
But there is an energy savings on the heat, they take longer. There's
Right.
an energy savings.
Yes.
And if you're gonna be doing this, you're gonna be installing those in low-income homes. I think it may make more sense only because there could be savings on the bill side, which could be critical to someone who's on the cusp. But just
Yeah, definitely.
The technology's getting better. I
Mhm.
mean, in Europe, they've been using them for a while.
Yeah, I know we have installed some, I just don't know off the top of my head what the breakdown is, but I do know we have some electric resistance as part of that, yeah. Okay, so despite the fact that we have incentives that help residents electrify, our current programs have provided very minimal guidance and support to residents, especially, the non-income qualified programs, so what we would otherwise call like market rate customers. All we really have is the rebate and the financing, but they really have to figure it out all on their own, find their contractors, do the research, go what rebates are out there, compare quotes, and then just apply for the loan or the rebates themselves. So we know that we need more services to address other customer barriers that financial incentives alone don't solve. So on the emergency replacements, this is a particular issue on water heaters. The large majority of water heaters are replaced on burnout. So when they stop working, and at that point, folks just want to replace it as fast as possible and not go without hot water, understandably. So there are, replacing a gas water heater with a heat pump water heater, there are more like electrical requirements because you normally have to do an electrical circuit. So there's some barriers that you may not have with just replacing a gas water heater with another gas water heater. So that's why addressing this market is really important for addressing the water heater market. Then there's also lack of clear information. I do think this has gone better in the past year or so, now with just a bit more awareness about heat pumps and just electrification in general. But still, as newer technologies, customers have to kind of go out there and find the information on their own and find different websites. Then difficulty selecting contractors and equipment. Again, this I do think has gone better in the past year and a half or so. There are more contractors that are doing electrification projects now, but it can be a daunting task to, get a lot of different contractor quotes, compare them, like not really knowing which ones are the most experienced, if the equipment that they're proposing is going to be a good fit. So it still, requires some work. And then limited time and money. So specifically on the limited time, I think that our current programs, the rebate and the loan program, to date have largely served like deep green kind of early adopter customer segment. Those that may be like environmentally motivated to do this, or, just have more interest in the technology, and that are willing to, spend the time researching and getting different quotes and really project managing their own upgrades. But that can be time consuming, and for someone like just an average customer that doesn't have the same motivations, that just wants like their water heater replaced as fast as possible, or like a heating system replaced as fast as possible, and just knows that it can be done streamlined and well, our current incentives program doesn't really solve that issue. And then there's technically complicated installations and just, maybe residents not having a place to turn with questions. That isn't to the contractor directly, that's trying to sell them a product. Okay, so future for building electrification. So this diagram just shows our vision for our next phase of building electrification programs this year. So at the top, we hope to scale to whole home. So in the home upgrade program, the direct install program for income qualified residents, we really have only been doing one electric appliance per home. And we also have not been doing heat pump HVAC systems, just because, we were going by like a lower cost per home or lower average cost. So we are proposing to scale this. So we would start to offer whole home electrification to income qualified residents at no cost to them. We also hope to increase the number of homes impacted per year across all segments. So to achieve this, we need one-stop shop services. So this is really going to be, it was being led by our marketing team. So we know that we want more robust information and tools available on our website on electrification, maybe something like a bill calculator, things like that. So this is something that our marketing team is working on. So somebody can go to our website and just really find a lot of answers and education about electrification in the home. Then the concierge service. This is something we're actually planning to have in-house. So one of the positions that Sean mentioned in the programs team would be leading this piece. So right now we're just, not currently staffed to answer a lot of technical questions. We get a decent amount of questions through our inbox. A lot of them are basic, but then every once in a while, if they're really detailed, we just don't have the bandwidth to answer those at scale. And we really think that's critical to have a place where a customer can turn to and, ask technical questions like, hey, can you help me figure out the equipment or compare this contractor quotes and just, get information from. So this would be this dedicated PC staff member. And then the turnkey installation service is what this contract with Franklin Energy is for. So this is the piece that I'll now talk about in more detail. Well, before we're getting there, this just shows the timeline for all of these things and how it all fits together. So the top three blue lines, that's the three components that are part of the turnkey installation service, part of this contract. Which I'll talk about in more detail, but there's essentially the income qualified direct install piece, which is installing it at no cost to the homeowner if they're income qualified. That's an extension of the home upgrade program. Then the market rate would be offering the same installation services to market rate or non-income qualifying customers, but at a cost to them. And then the emergency water heater replacement service. To ensure quality, we don't want to launch all of these at once. So we do plan to phase them in, prioritizing the income qualified install service because that's the one that we have a wait list for and have had it for about 5 months. So we'll be working hard to try to launch that as fast as possible. And then the green line, that's the one-stop shop. So again, just different iterations of that and just building up our website to have more tools and information available. And then the concierge, as I mentioned, would be a dedicated programs person. And we envision them that in the second half of this year, they can start to provide concierge services to our customers. We also do see the concierge working really closely with a potential in-house contact center. So this is something that our account services team is exploring and has presented to the executive committee on, but is still like an exploratory phase, is potentially bringing our call center or contact center in-house. Right now, the call center that we have is through a third party, and they're not really equipped to answer even basic questions like, what's the status of my rebate? What different programs, incentive programs exist out there. So we really envision sort of the concierge and potential in-house contact center to work closely together. If we have a more equipped contact center to be able to answer all programs related questions, then not everything would go to the concierge, just really technical inquiries. Okay, so now sending into, oh, yes.
Before you drive on,
When would you scale the whole house? I mean, because you have a backlog right now doing single appliances. Are you gonna, when would you do the whole house scaling?
We would do it immediately. That's the plan.
And
Yeah.
so were you gonna run out of money before you enter your wait list, or do you think this program provides enough money to basically do whole house scaling?
I think the program provides enough money to do whole house. The program budget was developed in a way to support whole home electrification for all the homes that would be served. And we have about 70 people on the wait list. The program, as I'll show in like a later slide, it's like 575 is budgeted to support 575 at a minimum homes. So there's enough.
And then that's scaling the whole house.
That's correct. Yeah. This next iteration is scaling to whole house. Yeah.
And then one question on conservation, is it broad enough to include potentially upgrading batteries and other things depending on what's at the customer's house?
We do envision it to be that broad, yes. I think the initial focus would be building electrification, but we're looking for someone that has more skills that can answer, questions about EV charging or solar batteries. So that would be the goal, yes.
Right, because it
Yes.
seems like, particularly on the non-income qualified, if somebody's trying to understand what they can do with their house,
Mhm.
then the whole picture, so to speak, is important.
Yes,
So, great,
yeah.
thank you.
Yep, John.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to make sure I understand how this program is gonna work. If it's income qualified installs, we have a backlog, we're gonna start rolling that out. Is that on a sliding scale cost share basis, or is this a complete subsidy from us for those households?
It would be completely free to those households.
Okay.
It would be
so-
fully paid for by PCE, and, we would leverage any other third-party incentives that are available, but otherwise, to the resident, it would be completely free.
Got it. And so, I think of this world that from a housing, is this gonna be very low income levels?
It would, well, we haven't, in the contract with Franklin, we don't define it. How we have been defining the income qualifications for the current program is less than 80% of the average medium income in homeowners. So it's not available for renters right now, it's just homeowners and less than 80% of the average medium income, which is technically the low income threshold.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, did we consider any kind of sliding scale or at least a cost share? Cause someone at 80% might not need 100% subsidy on this.
Mhm.
Thinking about using our dollars wisely.
That is something that we have talked about. We have talked about just having like a sliding scale of incentives. We were not planning to roll out the program in 2024 with that immediately. But as we scale and we start to serve more homes and, we know we would need to grow the budget, that is something that we would do is create more of a sliding scale. So not everything is free, and maybe the income qualifications go down, and then there's like more incentives for that, like moderate income than those that are not income qualified at all. So it's
other
something you mentioned.
components-
Yeah, go ahead.
Other components of the program that we'll do later are for all the rest of our customer base. But it's segmented. So those other turnkey projects, whether it's DIY or, but those will be required from us. So the only piece where it's entirely on our dime is that low income customer. And then the rest is the sliding scale based on.
Are we prioritizing the wait list based on lower income levels, or are we just first come, first serve, and it's 100% subsidy?
We haven't vetted, like the about 70 people or so that we have on the wait list are just people that have expressed interest in the program through our website. So they have not been qualified, we haven't like vetted that they have all that are income qualified and everything. That's something we would do once we sign this contract. And some of them may not qualify, but how we have run the program in the past, 2.5 years is first come, first serve. So as long as they meet the qualifications, they get served out of the pace that they come in. Yeah.
Personally, I would like to prioritize the reach of this program, and so any kind of sliding scale or
Mhm.
prioritization on income levels, I'd be interested in. And then when we get to the market rate rollout, I see that's got kind of a gradual ramp up. I understand programmatically, it'll take us a little bit to get that going, but once that is going, that's cost neutral to us. That's basically us doing a
a volume buy on behalf of our, customers, and then, we presumably any number could take us up on that because it's not subsidized?
So for the market rate projects, they would receive the same rebates and incentives that we have, that we currently offer through our rebate program. So we don't intend to have direct additional incentives through our market rate. I think indirectly, they will get more incentives because this program will just provide more support. Like, there'll be things like site assessments that or Franklin would do. If there's an emergency water heater replacement, there's like an added labor component of that. And like those sort of soft costs, like Peninsula Clean Energy will cover. But the actual like rebate on the equipment will be the same through the market rate and install service than through our standalone rebate program, which we still intend to keep. Yeah.
So we're intending to throttle that and eventually allow folks to do that. Do we see a time when we can just let everyone sign up for a market rate purchase?
I think everybody would be allowed to sign up for market rate purchase.
Okay.
Yeah, so everybody would, it wouldn't be income qualified, like anybody could come through it. I think we just,
But we could do
It's a function of budget.
2,000 next year. Just curious.
it's a function of the budget. We can't do that next year, yeah, yeah.
I'm just curious if we can get to the world where we're doing volume buying and providing predictable purchasing path for our customers, but then it's cost neutral to us. We can just open it up broadly. I think that'd be effective.
Yeah, ultimately, this step provides higher quality service. So there will still be two options, putting aside the income qualified program. There will still be two options. Someone can walk in the door and say, I don't need any of your special services. I'm gonna figure it all out. Just give me the rebate and the on-bill financing and I'll do it. And then what this will do though is give people an option when they walk in the door and say, I don't wanna figure out all that hassle stuff. I just want you guys to take care of it and give me your rebate and the on-bill financing.
And
So-
and I'll pay for it.
And I'll pay for the balance of the cost.
Yeah.
We know that in the long run, we will need to scale this beyond what the budget allows for, and we will need to think about in a more sophisticated way, tiering the program across all of the segments that we serve. And what exactly that looks like, we have not yet determined, but basically, as you're suggesting, and as Alejandra commented, we will have to tier our incentive program more than what it is today.
And I guess I'm just suggesting, I would love to see a top tier that is cost neutral to us fully, but makes a very simplified purchasing path for the customer. I think that'd be a great service we could provide and could be really impactful. And if we could pull it off cost neutral, I'd love to support that.
Absolutely, and we've had some internal discussions that are essentially that, where we would offer the on-bill finance, but not rebates. Because the on-bill finance, the money comes back and we can continue to recycle it. So we do anticipate in the coming months coming back to the board with some of those concepts and would certainly love to have more input on how to do that properly.
And the other thing that would layer onto that over time is this revenue diversification, right? So if there's potentially a congressional earmark that has to be targeted for a certain program like this, then that could cover staff time, right? Because those are all sunk costs as well that the customer doesn't. So.
Oh,
Yeah, please.
Curious, see that where the building permits part of it comes in, with the one stop or concessionaire. With far as the building permits and plans, require larger scale ones and how they fit into like Title 24 requirements. So what requires for efficiency. Does that mean work in the system? Because each local jurisdiction can have requirements for permits and permits for all across.
Yeah, it is currently part of the contract with Franklin. It is part of the scope that permits are pulled by the contractors that are actually doing the installation. So they would handle all the permitting in whatever jurisdiction. Yeah, correct, yeah. All right, so now, again, just narrowing down into the contract. So we've already, discussed it some, but these are the three segments that are included as part of this, this contract. The income qualified, no cost electrification is really, I guess, Home Upgrade V2, which is an expansion of our existing program. But we would start to offer whole home electrification, immediately as soon as we launch it. And then the market rate low cost electrification, this would be a new service. Again, we will continue to offer the rebate program, and we do still anticipate the majority of residents, market rate residents will just go through the rebate program. But this will be an additional way for them to electrify that's more streamlined, but it would be at a cost to them. So they would pay whatever the net cost is after rebates. And again, the rebates would be the same. And then the emergency water heater replacement program, prioritizing replacing failing gas water heaters within 48 hours. So, we do intend to replace them with heat pump water heaters for feasible. There may be situations in which heat pump water heater installation is not immediately available, like on the day that the contractor goes on site, in which case we would use strategies like loaners, like a gas loaner water heater, if there's no electrical capacity like right then, just to be able to get all the electrical in place and then later go back and install heat pump water heater again with the goal of electrifying, and like all the end products would be electric water heaters, but there may be some homes that get a loaner. Yes.
So I was trying to get the low cost installation, you've been describing it as simplified installation, but is it actually low cost? Like, is it cheaper going through Franklin and their contractors than if I just got a contractor off the street? I mean, is that?
To be honest, it's not guaranteed to be the lowest cost. The program, as I'll talk about, is going to be paying prevailing wage. The contract with Franklin will have fixed pricing for all the measures. So we have, a bunch of water heater configurations, a bunch of heat pump HVAC configurations, and how things are going to be priced for market rate customers will be based on fixed pricing. So it'll be transparent, just based on fixed pricing minus rebates. So we do intend for it to be low cost. I mean, based on the volume, we've negotiated like good prices based on the fact that this is a 3-year program and we're securing, that we're going to do the marketing and ensure more homes go through the program. But that doesn't mean that, somebody couldn't go out there and theoretically find a cheaper installation. But the contract will have fixed pricing and will pay prevailing wage.
I think John was getting at the equipment itself. Are you gonna get volume discounts? I mean, you're gonna pass those through, or are they gonna get marked up to retail rates? Because I think that's part of our agenda.
With Franklin is working with the distributor to get some of the equipment so that the discounts would be passed through the program, and that is already sort of factored into the pricing that we have. It is a 3-year contract. So if later on like we were able to find like better discounts with distributors, or if the volume grows, like that could be updated as an amendment to the contract. But Franklin is working with the distributor to provide some of the key equipment at least. And that's already factored into the pricing that's in the contract right now.
And I would just say that even even if it's not the very lowest cost, the predictability of it and, taking that, everyone feels a little daunted when they go out and try to do contracting themselves, right? So just be able to, here's your price, yes, no, and there's predictability behind that. I think, we'd get a lot more people interested in taking us up on that.
Okay, so now talking a bit more about the request for proposals process. So we did a public solicitation. The RFP was developed with SVCE. They anticipate, or they plan to go to their board in their March board meeting, and will be seeking approval to launch the same services during the contract that we have with Franklin. So that's why it was developed with them. And then we released it at the end of August. Proposals were due at the end of October, and we made a selection by the end of December. We received 5 proposals. The review team included PC programs team members. It included 1 SVC programs team member, and then it also included 1 CAC team member as well, who reviewed all the proposals. We ended up shortlisting 2 for in-person interviews and 2 rounds of follow-up questions. After doing that, we selected Franklin Energy and their team as the awardee for the contract. So a little bit more about Franklin Energy and their team. So Franklin Energy, who the contract is with, they're a large energy consulting firm and who's very active in California. They have experience with energy efficiency and electrification, and they do have some experience working in San Mateo County. Like they've done some small work even in electrification through grants that they've received from Meta in the past. They also currently work with MCE, the CCA up in Marin County and other northern counties with their direct install energy efficiency program. And then the contractors that will be actually doing the installations as part of the program, there will be 3. And so Building Solutions is the contractor that currently works with Franklin on the MCE direct install energy efficiency program. And they'll be focused on doing the income qualified installations. Hughes Service is a large Bay Area contractor, very experienced with electrification, even through our own rebate and loan programs, which we track, what contractors are doing the most projects. Hughes is by far the largest, so they have been doing a lot of projects in San Mateo County in the past, 2 years or so. They're going to focus on the market rate installations and also the emergency water heater replacement service. And then Electrify My Home is another contractor that's very electrification focused that will also focus on the market rate installs. Part of the team in the Franklin proposal included Zero Home. So Zero Home is an energy modeling software, and Franklin will utilize that during the site assessments to develop the home's scope of works and to be able to target customers. The tool does things like estimate bill savings, bill impacts, and stuff like that. So it'll be utilized in many ways in the program, and that's part of the contract as well. So as I mentioned, the program will pay prevailing wage to all installation contractors. Franklin is responsible for ensuring compliance. That's built into the contract, but also built into the contract is PC's ability to audit the records directly ourselves.
And so through labor, this question came to me, so this seems like a good place to ask for clarification. Is Franklin going to register with the Department of Industrial Relations for a prevailing wage project number? If not, why? And how will they run compliance? Apparently, as of yesterday, Franklin yet hasn't been registered with the Department of Industrial Relations.
The prevailing wage, Franklin does intend to do prevailing wage verification through the California Department of Industrial Relations, DIR. The contractors are the ones that are enrolled, because the contractors are the ones doing the work, the installation work, and the contractors are the ones, or all the employees of the contractors are the ones that are being paid prevailing wage. So they will, I think 2 of them are already enrolled, but if they're not already enrolled, they will enroll, because that's how Franklin does intend to do compliance verification, is to DIR. But it would be the contractors that are enrolled.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so this just shows the average cost for whole home electrification for a typical home for the Franklin contract pricing. So this is average, and this also includes everything. So this assumes that the house has all gas appliances. So this includes a water heater, a heat pump HVAC system, and electric induction range, a clothes dryer, electric clothes dryer, a level 1 charger, and then it also assumes that every single one of those appliances needs a circuit. So that's why it includes the cost of like 4 circuits. It assumes that we need a sub panel. We do expect that the majority of homes won't need full main panel replacements or specifically like service upgrades. We want to use our design guidelines to be able to minimize service upgrades and electrify homes within their existing main panel capacity. But some may need sub panels just to have extra like breaker slots and stuff like that. And then the cost of permits will be included in any test that's required for closing permits and so on. So average cost is a little bit under $32,000. And as I mentioned, the contract with Franklin does have a very detailed list of all the measures like fixed pricing, and there's a bunch of different configurations for every type of equipment. And that table is how we will pay Franklin. So that is the basis of how we'll pay them based on what was actually installed and based on that fixed pricing. And then for income qualified homes, I should also note that the budget does also factor in doing some minor home repairs, which is something that we have been doing through the existing program. and some light energy efficiency and some resiliency measures in some homes. So it does factor in like just some additional budget for non-electrification specific things for specifically income qualified homes.
So what service are you assuming for a whole house upgrade? Because I think particularly with like lower income houses, I mean, they may not even have 100 service.
Well, I guess I can go to this one. So this is the $26 million budget breakdown. So again, $26 million, it includes the $2 million for Menlo Park. I guess just to mention about Menlo Park first, the Menlo Park funds, which come from the California Energy Commission, because they received a grant for $4.5 million to do a community-wide building electrification project. They intend to do electrification in income qualified homes, specifically in the Bellhaven neighborhood. So the entire $2 million from Menlo Park will be focused on the income qualified installs. So that is factored in. Just wanted to note that that is not for all three services, it's specifically for income qualified. So this shows the budget breakdown in the minimum number of homes. What we're showing here does assume that every single home gets every single appliance. We know that in practice, that will not be the case. So in practice, the number of homes that we serve is going to be greater. This is just the way that we're presenting it. It's like sort of whole home equivalent. Like if every single home needed everything, this is the minimum number of homes we would serve. But either because they choose not to want everything electrified, maybe we do a home that is willing to have a heat pump water heater and a heat pump HVAC system, but they want to keep their gas stove or something, and we won't force that upon them. So that could be an option, or maybe another option is like another reason is, they need a lot of remediation or something like that, and we don't do every single appliance. So that 575 does assume is every single appliance, but we know in practice it'll be more homes. Yeah. Yes.
Could you, by chance, qualify what you mean by light energy efficiency repairs? I had a resident ask me whether, for instance, that would include window replacement.
Window replacement is not currently part of that. So it means like attic insulation, air sealing. Those are kind of the main ones, like LED light bulbs, smart thermostats, things like that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Further with a question though about the panels. To the question of panels, we do have an analysis of the service territory. We think the overwhelming majority of homes in the service territory are either 100 or 200 amp panels. There are some homes out there that are older. There is going to be a cost threshold where we are not going to be able to serve that home in that low income bracket. So if we walk into a home and it's all knob and tube and there's a 60 amp panel, we may not be able to do much because the cost will be 50,000 or more. So that is going to be a consideration, but our expectation is that's going to be a very small minority of homes that are in that scenario.
So your idea is you're gonna put a cap on the total that you would spend at any one house. And for these small number of outliers, they might get sort of kicked out, so to speak.
Yeah, or we may be able to do some percentage of the work that we might otherwise do.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and then so in this table also market rate installed an emergency water heater. This is especially variable because this is just based on estimates of how many homes we think may participate specifically through the turnkey installation. Just to be clear, like this doesn't include our standalone rebate program. Again, we'll continue to run that. For the market rate installs, the line that's really all entirely like Peninsula Clean Energy rebates, and we do factor in like if some homes get loans through our 0% all bill financing program, then that money is just sort of flowing through Franklin. So that's why it needs to be allocated for in the contract here. Emergency water heater, again, just mainly the heat pump water heater rebate and that additional cost of like labor costs of it being an emergency installation. Implementation costs includes anything that's non-installation related. So it's really includes a lot of services, all the customer support for all segments, contractor oversight, all the admin and reporting, applying for different, third-party rebates. And the costs do account for efficiencies and savings of a joint program with SVCE. So as I mentioned, SVCE will be going to their board in the March meeting to seek approval for the same services. And that allows us to have some savings on the administrative side of things and just leverage each other program because they do intend to also, work with Franklin. So that's factored in here. And as I mentioned already, Menlo Park funds are entirely for income qualified installs. As you see on the right, the majority of the program budget is really for income qualified installs, 81%. And then that's the breakdown for the other components.
So the 175 for the market rate, does that include our rebates?
Yes.
So you're thinking it's only 60 a year over 3 years?
That's what we're estimating. It could be more. So if it's more, we will need to do an amendment and come back to the board. Again, we'll still have our rebate program. So there's still another way this isn't like reflective of our entire market rate installations. But yes, that is what we're estimating here is only about 60 homes a year through this particular segment of the turnkey install service.
But if you just went straight with the rebate, that's another path for this, is that?
Correct, yeah, if you just went straight with the rebate, that's not accounted for here.
Okay. This is only if you went through this program.
Correct.
And got a rebate in addition to their contracting services, that then you as a market rate person paid to the contractor. I think I got that right.
Yes, yeah, this is only if you're going through the turnkey installation service, yes.
And is there anything that prevents somebody from joining this program and getting the estimate and then going, no way, I'm not doing this? Like, is there any cost to them to get you guys to come out and do the first $1,000 worth of work before they have a contract to sign?
So there's no cost to them to get us out to do a site assessment. So that cost is covered by PCE to go out there and evaluate the home, come up with this scope of work and everything. So if they choose not to move forward, that is a cost that we cover. But before installation happens, they do have to sign a participation agreement that would say that they're going to pay for the upgrades for whatever the net cost is after rebates. So they do have to sign a binding agreement before any installation happens.
Then the cost are not too much. So maybe you start that way, and if it gets abused, then maybe you make it a $500, something
right,
charge, but enough to show that there's serious.
Yeah, right. That's certainly something we can do. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Adam.
At the risk of going too deep, I was a little curious about the amount for market rate installs and the number of homes you're talking about might be compared with the other figures you shared earlier with like how many installs or replacements of water heaters and other space heaters we've had to date. That number was like in about 2,000-ish.
Yeah.
Right, I'm guessing that this number of homes is also the kind of whole home scale.
Yeah.
Can we get a sense of how much more we're increasing our reach with regard to heaters throughout the member agency?
So we honestly have no idea how many customers will want to use the turnkey service. Today, some contractors are already doing direct to customer marketing. And those contractors are not going to then suggest, oh, you should go install with PCE. So they're doing the sale, right? We're not actually out in front that much. We certainly will be communicating to customers that this is an option. So as a consequence, that's why we anticipate that the volume may be modest, at least at the beginning. And the truth is, from the standpoint of scaling this effort, what we really want is a lot of contractors to be doing this, right? So we don't want to take over the market. We want to give customers an easy pathway, but we really ultimately want other contractors to follow suit, right? And make it as easy for customers, right? So this If we're successful, it doesn't necessarily mean we have to do a lot. What we really want is the other contractors to come along. Does that make sense? But we could be surprised. We could end up with a lot of volume here and then we'll have to adjust our approach.
Well, if we get volume discounts, presumably we could do something that one of the local contractors couldn't do, because they just wouldn't have the volume.
Yes, and that's one of the reasons why the 2 or 3 parts here all work together, because our income qualified program actually provides the basis for the volume to then go after the preferential pricing on equipment that we can then offer everybody.
I think Director Taylor had a really great point about the assessments, and I think that PCE could also consider offering homeowners just the assessments at a cost as a comfort level for people who have this inertia. They're going to deal with a contractor they feel they might be taken advantage of. PCE offering independent assessments for a price, so that might be the impetus they need to go forward.
Betsy?
So actually, following up on that, will the contact center, when that's up and running, be available to anyone? So someone could perhaps do this assessment, use the contact center, and be going out and working with their own contractor?
Yes, that's right.
And more
Yeah, and the
concierge.
concierge as well, yeah, yeah.
And then, will the support, will Franklin be providing support in multiple languages, or how will they be?
Yeah, we do, that's the question that we asked them during the, interview phase, is that at least like they have some, the main languages like capabilities like Spanish. I know that they will have that. I'm not, 100% sure on the other languages, but we will, create, before we launch the program, create a plan of how to make sure that we're, addressing the major languages in the county. Yeah.
And will you be working, or will Franklin be working with the community partners to get some trust in the community and?
Yes, that part we actually intend to work directly ourselves. So it's not part of this contract. As you may be familiar with our community outreach, our outreach grants under our marketing and communications team. We have been doing grants to community-based organizations, but they're grants. But what we intend to do for this program is to more closely engage some particular CBO, community-based organizations that are already doing this on-the-ground work, specifically enrolling income qualified homes into energy programs like this, so ones that are like already kind of doing this work. And we intend to engage with them directly, so like a contract between PCE and like a community-based organization outside of the outreach grant framework and outside of the Franklin contract, so we have that relationship directly ourselves, but we do plan to do that, yes.
And then is there anything in the contract with the homeowner to require that they do not sell the home for a certain period of time, or if they do, they need to reimburse? In other words, someone who wants to sell their home doesn't go out, get it electrified, and then be able to reap the benefit of that, and PCE is borne the costs.
Yeah, the participation agreement will be developed once the contract is signed, and that's certainly something we can consider when we draft that. Yeah. Yes.
I was just wondering, talking about single family homes, is it just detached? I mean, I know that condos and townhomes can be more complicated with some shared walls, but they also might be more in the low income category, so are they covered at all?
The contract will only cover up to 4 units, 4 dwelling units, so condos like in larger buildings unfortunately would not be covered as part of this.
An individual condo owner could be covered.
Yes, like if it's up to 4 units, so like a fourplex, or like a townhome, assuming that there's no issues with the HOA and stuff like that, like could be served. It's just larger buildings, like larger condos would not be, yeah. Yes.
If this program is wildly successful, as we hope it is, and more money is needed in the program within the 3 years, or if Menlo Park's portion, we actually have $4 million 4.5 million. This is the first tranche for 2 million. Is it an easiest amendment to add either on the PCE side and or Menlo Park side, or is that something that should be considered as part of this?
Did you understand?
Well, basically, for Menlo Park, we have $4 million that we need to use.
Right.
And so, and it's within the 3 years. So I'm wondering if right now this is working with the first $2 million for Menlo Park, but in fact, we're going to be needing to hopefully utilize all of the $4 million. So is there, will that be an easy amendment?
You need to grow with it.
To grow with it, and also on PCE side, hopefully, same issue where there's.
I mean, that's gonna be part of our planning around the customer service center. And also, right now, we have slated for 1 concierge person. And we'll kind of see what the volume brings, and if we have to grow, we'll grow, but that's also gonna be a function of budget and what we can bring in from non-repair revenue to support more of this. So yes, and TBD, if that's fair.
Yeah. On the Menlo Park side, if we go through this, want to
Add more,
is that?
assuming.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
we would just need to do a contract amendment because it does include the not to exceed contract amount, but yes, we can do contract amendments and yeah.
Thank you.
Craig and then.
Just slightly related to that, does the CEO have any ability to switch how much is between these different categories? Like, assume that the market rate is wildly successful and the income qualified slightly slower. I mean, do we have the ability to move that around? Because presumably from Franklin's point of view, it's still installing the same number of pieces of equipment. So
two
are
questions,
we
really.
binding this thing together in a way that, you know, it's rigid?
One's a contract question, so go ahead.
Yeah, we do have the ability to move funds between budget lines, and that is part of the contract, is we have the right to do that. Yeah.
And that's under your.
Yes, and Raphael is the director. We also have the ability to move funds within the overall budget. So if we see that this is really taking off, but another area is stymied within the overall group budget, we can move things around to be responsive.
Yes.
But because this is a board decision, if there's anything that's significant along those lines, they'll come to the board.
Yeah.
Ken?
Yeah, thank you. So one of the things I used to do a long time ago is I designed solar houses and passive energy houses, and I did energy audits and did this kind of work. A long time ago, if you wanted, if it cost $1 to heat a certain volume of air or water with gas, and it cost $2 to heat that same medium with a heat pump, and it cost $4 to heat it with electric resistance. This is a long time ago. Okay? Heat pumps have become more efficient since then. But when I see people, contractors out there pitching this stuff in the retail market, I've seen them claim, oh, it's your operating costs won't change. And when you look at their numbers, the numbers are bogus. They've got fraudulent assumptions built into their numbers. So and I would like to be confident that the homeowner, as part of this process, it's a really objective, really factual assessment of the operating costs. If it's truly break even, and I haven't done these numbers in a long time. If it's truly break even in today's world, that's great, and they should know that. If it's a 10% difference, they should know that. If it's 2x, like it used to be, they should know that. So there are really good, I used to do this stuff with a slide rule, that's how long ago. There are really good computer simulation programs now that will forecast that with really good accuracy. And I really think that should be part of the process. I don't want people coming back and saying, I thought this, I got this great deal to put this stuff in, and now it's costing me a lot more to operate. I kind of don't want that to happen.
Right, yeah.
So is that part of the process we're talking about?
Yes, it is, and specifically through Zero Home, so I mentioned them in like an earlier slide that they're part of the team Zero Home is an energy modeling software that Franklin will use during the site assessments. And part of it, what it'll do is estimate the bill impacts of that particular home based on actual characteristics and details of the equipment that's in that home. So the site assessor would use it at the home, and they would be, pulling like the existing furnace efficiency, existing water heater efficiency, inputs like that. And then the model would estimate bill impacts. And we also would intend for it to show different impacts based on different rates and stuff like that. But yes, that is what we plan to do with Zero Home, is this tool that would be utilized at the site with real inputs of the home.
Thank you.
I want to be conscious about time here. It's now 8 o'clock. And we have a whole presentation on project ownership, which is, does it make sense for PCE to own generation projects, right? This is a big issue for us that we've talked about for months since the retreat. So I just want everyone to be conscious about that, because as we take time on this, it's going to adversely impact that.
This is the last slide, and I only included it because this is how I presented it to the executive committee. So this is a higher level summary of the budget. This is a more detailed one by fiscal year, and it also has greenhouse gas emissions estimations based on the 3 segments. And it breaks out the Menlo Park funds separate from the 24 million from PCE. But it's essentially the same as the previous, just more detailed. And then this is my last slide, which is just, again, the request summary that I presented at the start. So that was the end of the content.
Prior slide.
Okay.
Betsy and then Colleen.
So I just wanted to make a point that people now will be getting air conditioning, so that one of the things we have seen is that people's bills do increase because all of a sudden they're using air conditioning, especially as it gets hotter. And that's something they didn't have available before, so it does affect energy costs.
And the department did, I think Raphael, in connection with Silicon Valley Clean Energy, did a fairly comprehensive PowerPoint assessment on this issue, which really hasn't been presented to the board.
That's correct. We have published that information, but we haven't done a formal presentation to the board. We did, our engineer, program manager Blake Hershaft, who is at PTO, along with technical members of the Silicon Valley Clean Energy team, did spend a lot of time on the operating cost question, which is a legitimate concern, especially with rising rates. And the determination was that under the e-electric rate, there is some modest savings with full electrification. There are a variety of assumptions there, but it has been borne out, at least in some of the actual analysis that we've done. It's not for everybody. That's not always true, but in general, it will tend to be true for the cases that we're likely dealing with. Yes, and we can circulate a link to that.
I think that should be distributed to the board, but I also think it would be wise to schedule a study session to go over that. It's pretty detailed. And it's not self-evident just by glancing through it.
Yes, that's true.
Just a very quick comment. I appreciate the concern. I would love to see some data back on this particular program, the before and afters on some kind of roll-up basis of actual energy and cost savings. Thank you.
Yeah, that's an excellent recommendation.
But also, the delta between natural gas and electricity, when I did some of the same stuff as actually a GC, right? It has changed significantly, right? So natural gas is no longer as cheap as it once was. And so that has compressed those prices, right? So that, if you get an efficient energy pump and, energy pump, it's a heat pump, that replaces your gas heater, and you got the right ducting. You talked about it last time. You could be ahead of the game.
It's also worth noting that gas prices are extremely volatile, especially in the winter. And that's a challenge for both modeling, but also a challenge for consumers because they get hit at the worst possible time when they're using a lot of it.
Very quickly, have you considered some people, I've been approached by renters who said, is this program turnkey only going to apply to owner occupied? And there are some property owners who rent properties, they're making very little income because they're small, old properties, and the renters are saying, please replace the furnace and the water heater, and the owners are saying, we don't have the money to do it.
Mhm. Yeah, I think for the market rate segment, this would cover rental occupied units. Again, just like our rebate program right now isn't limited to homeowner occupied homes. And we have seen a decent amount of applications that have been like the property owners doing it for tenant occupied units. So through market rate, we would support that. For the income qualified piece, it is not currently planned to support renters just because it is a free service. We want to make sure that, you know, the ultimately who's getting the long-term benefit is the homeowner. So if we were to roll that out to renters, you know, the long-term benefit is to the property owner. So it's something that we have discussed and we, you know, may consider in the next couple of years. You know, we see ourselves like iterating on this program, but at the start, it would just be homeowners. And that's what it has been since we started it about 2.5 years ago, just to focus on that piece.
So just to sort of set the stage here, this is a launch, right? This is, I mean, we're doing this, people can still do it on their own because they could do it on their own before. They still get the rebate, but there's a problem with them, many people other than early adopters not wanting to get into doing the whole contract analysis. So this is a program to try to help with that. And it's just a launch. If it takes off, it'll be back to us, I guarantee you. And if it doesn't take off, in either case, they're going to be assessing it because we have to measure absolutely everything we do so that we can be clear about where we're succeeding and where we're not. Otherwise, we're wasting money. And and the team is very focused on that. Which is why you got so much data about what's behind making this installation services proposal, which took a long time tonight, but I think it was really important to provide that data to all of you.
Great program, thank you.
Betsy.
I'd like to move it forward and make the motion to approve this.
Well, we need public comment first. Is there any public comment? I don't see any public comment in the room. Is there any public comment online? Okay.
I'll
Does
second
any?
your motion.
You'll second it? Okay, thank you. But if anyone else has a comment on the board, I want to be able to enable that. Tiger, yes.
And I do have a comment. Thank you, Chair. Independent of this, I'm going through my own process. And first of all, I am a renter. My landlord trusts me to, if he says, you know, do you need a new water heater? That then I can start investigating a heat pump water heater, which was triggered by him first talking to me about water heaters. And then I felt safe enough, comfortable enough because of our relationship. Well, I serve on this board and I look into it. And so he trusts me to do that. And I'm not a technician. Now I have access to Rafael Reyes over there. And so I can say to him, hey, here's my situation. And I'm kind of using myself as a test case against what I'm learning on the board. Can you help me navigate this? To which here's the list of the contractors who could install the heat pump. Cool. I call that guy. You're gonna need a sub panel, talk to an electrician. I could go back to Rafael. I happen to know a guy from working at the grocery store that I want to check in with first, right? And this is my process. And then figuring out where to get these various rebates from and bundle it. And all of this to then bring to the landlord, say, here's the results of my investigation. Shall we move it forward? So this program that we're talking about, boy, do I get it. Boy, am I going to be happy to vote yes on it. And the easier we can make it for folks like myself who are non-technicians, regardless of whether or not you're an owner. Because, you know, to the question of renters, it might actually enable some of them to be able to have that otherwise difficult conversation with their landlord. And the more we're streamlining this for folks who are trying to get on with their lives and do the right thing, big yay.
Thank you. Yes, I just want to quickly echo that a little bit and thank everyone who's been involved in this to date and just appreciate what we're voting on tonight as a huge achievement. It's, you know, I feel like every time I come to a board meeting for PCE, it's another historic night in which we're doing something tremendous and very important. And this is another one of those nights. So I just wanted to, I appreciate the emergency replacement assistance with water heaters. I think this one is a key piece for so many folks who, you know, not just to dispel fear and worry and concern, but to legitimately address a number of situations that have come up that PCE is already aware of. I appreciate that Menlo Park is putting its grant into this program and that Silicon Valley Clean Energy is adopting something similar and collaborating with us to help us potentially save and serve even more. I appreciate that we're, this is, you know, prevailing wage installs. This is exactly what we should be doing. And we saw the numbers at the beginning of Alejandro's presentation. We're at the very beginnings of our service area making this huge step toward decarbonization. And this is going to be a key piece to getting us from the beginning to a true launch. So let's launch to the moon. Thank you.
Any other comments? Okay, we have a motion and a second. I don't think we have any board members online, do we?
No.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Just to comment on how we're doing these dramatic things. This entire year, this is gonna continue to happen. I mean, this is only the beginning. The stuff that's in the works, in the program groups, and in the power resources groups are game changers. And it, you know, some of it we're gonna miss on, right? But which is why we have to measure it. But we're pushing the needle. And I really do think almost every meeting, we're gonna have some game changer issues coming before us. It's why this board is so interesting. Thank you. And that's a thank you to Sean. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is a study session on project ownership, which I already introduced.
Sure. Good evening, first of all, Roy Chu, Director of Power Resources. Do we have the slides? I have this. Oh, I just click it. Okay, all right. My bad. Okay, I only have 12 slides, so I'll be fast with the time. So this is our first study session, I believe, so I'm not really sure of the format. We're not requiring the board to take any actions on this item. It's meant to foster conversation, and I'll be just leading the conversation here. So project ownership. So should PCE start owning its generation assets, storage assets? Currently in our portfolio, we don't have any that we currently own. Everything is contracted through long-term contracts or short-term contracts. So that's why we want to talk about today.
Other than
Yeah. Other than GovPB, I'm sorry. We'll get to that. It's part of this discussion as well. Okay, so the agenda is to talk about the purpose, why we're talking about this topic today. And I'm going to give a little background on how traditional utilities own projects and why they own it. And we'll go to PCE context, which is what consideration PCE should be mindful of when they consider ownership. What are the pros and cons of ownership, and how does it compare to long-term PPAs? And we'll look at a couple of case studies and then finally to sum it up and make some initial recommendations. So why are we talking about ownership? One is to level set the understanding of ownership. It is a little different from owning a car, owning a house, owning a generation assets from the very beginning is a little different. And to evaluate the pros and cons of ownership, to explore different ownership scenarios, and finally to seek alignment on future PCE ownership efforts. Again, we're not asking for any action tonight. We're just to here to seek alignments on future efforts. So throughout this presentation, and ultimately we want to talk about to own or not to own, but what to own, where to own, how to own, why ownership and why not ownership. Is ownership better than PPAs? And are there ownership opportunities available here for us? Any questions so far? Okay. So for background, let's look at how traditional utilities manage their ownership of projects. First category is these large centralized projects, and they consist of these large coal facilities, gas facilities, combined cycle, nuclear facilities, large hydro, and also transmission lines, which is not a generation assets, but for centralized projects, transmissions are essential for the power to be delivered from these centralized plants to the load centers. So the common here is that one, some of these resource types are not really applicable to PCE. And two, and there's really not a lot of ownership opportunities for these traditionally large centralized projects for us all. But we can look at the characteristic ownership on these large centralized projects and see how they apply to PCE. I'll go bullet by bullet here. So the first line is their large scale, and I'm putting here larger than 100 megawatts, but typically these resources are probably over 1,000 megawatts large. So they come with a high cost, capital cost to build, and very high risk to own. So that's probably a negative for PCE. And they are conventional resources, meaning they are not renewable. Large hydro is not even considered renewable under RPS and California RPS. So that's a negative for PCE. Long operating lives. A lot of these technologies can run longer than 30, 40 years with some major replacement required. So that's actually a positive for PCE because if we were to own it, there's a certain financing period. And after the financing period, debt services are paid off. These long operating life projects can generate a lot of upside on the back end of the operating lives. So that's a positive. Joint ownership. Most of these projects are owned by more than one owner. Multiple utilities own one project. And so that's a positive because it's risk sharing. So no single entity is bearing 100% of risk. And most of these resources require an anchor tenant, which means the majority ownership by one utility. And that utility contributes the most amount of money. And they're also serve as the operating agent, which means that they have the engineering expertise to run the plant. So that's something that we currently do not have the resource to do. So that's a negative for us. Then O&M and fuel management. These are also elements that require expertise to operate, which we don't currently have. Major replacement. So ownership comes with, just like any appliances, once it's, after a while, components wear down, you have to replace them, and major replacements does cost money. And depending on the market conditions, supply chain issues, they can be very expensive. And some are planned, some are unforeseen. Well, unforeseen, that means you have to build additional contingency or budget to building these major replacements. The last one is very important, which is the tax-exempt financing that public entities like us do enjoy and benefit from. And a lot of these projects that public-owned utilities own, they do take advantage of the tax-exempt financing. So that's a major plus for us. So that's one category of projects or project ownership that utilities traditionally own. So what about solar and wind? And there are large-scale solar and wind resources out there, but most of them are under a PPA structure. And that is true when solar is $100 per megawatt hour, and that is still true when solar is $30 to $40 megawatt hour. The renewable PPAs, power purchase agreements, are designed to take advantage of these solar and wind resources. So we do not see a lot of ownership by utilities on large-scale solar and wind. And I'll get into the reason a little bit later. The other category of ownership by utilities are local and distributed projects. And the project types are gas peakers to serve peaking hours only, and sometimes, most of the time, they're in local service territories. And then storage, solar, and microgrids, these are more recent phenomenons. And the primary function of these local distributed projects, if you're a distribution service provider like Edison or PG&E, you would use these resources to maintain local reliability, improve reliance, resilience, and provide other distribution level benefits. But PCE is not really a distribution service provider, so some of these benefits are very limited. Primarily, local projects will benefit us on the customer side, and both from a cost saving standpoint and also from a redundancy standpoint to provide customer benefits. They also create local jobs, and sometimes owning a local project will demonstrate innovation and leadership of the local utility. So that's the second type of ownership. Yeah, Sean?
Can I just ask a clarification?
Sure.
So for a project like this, in general,
Mhm.
these are not the large sort of centralized utility scale projects that you described previously.
Right.
So what on average, this would be from what?
So gas peakers.
10 megawatts to 50? Something like
Yeah, so
that?
yeah, sure. Gas peakers are large in size. Maybe if you have a single unit, it's about 50 megawatts. You can have multiple units to serve evening peak, participate in the market. So these are gas peakers are not behind the meter generation, and I'll get into behind the meter in a little bit. But solar, it really depends on if it's in front of the meter or behind the meter. If it's like a PV, it would be in kilowatt scale. If it's in front of the meter, it'll be a couple megawatts large, and if it's a local project.
Thank you.
Okay, so how do we put that into PCE context? So what are the considerations we should think about? Where to own, what to own, how to own? First of all, location. Should we own a project within our service territory or anywhere in California or maybe out of state? What kind of technology do we want to own? Do we want to own solar, geothermal, battery, new technologies? New technology come with certain technology risks. Do we want to own it by ourselves alone, or do we want to own it jointly with other partner CCAs? And configuration, and this is where I'll explain the behind the meter and front of the meter. So for behind the meter applications, like the GovPV program, they are primarily to serve customer load and provide customer benefits, and they are relatively small in scale and size, and they can be done within the service territory. Front of the meter applications or projects, they serve the grid. They're not behind any particular customer's meter. They provide grid benefits, they provide energy into the grid, and they're typically large in size. They can be built anywhere in California and can be injected into the grid. And the value is the market revenue that we get by serving that energy into the grid, capacity into the grid, and get returns. RA, for example, is a capacity product that we can offer to the grid. So that's the difference. So depending on where you start here, you'll become, if you pick location as the starting point. If you want to do within the service territory, then obviously we cannot do geothermal, we cannot do very large scale projects. If you choose behind the meter, yeah, same thing. It's really has to be limited by our service territory. So one thing that we need to be thinking about is if we're to own it, we want to finance it, then what is our bonding capacity? We have not issued any bonds under PCE to date. And so that is a financing question. So from a very preliminary study, we have determined, and this is very preliminary, that our bonding capacity without impacting our investment grade credit rating is about $135 million to $200 million. And that, so that means we could spend that much without, we can issue that much bond without contributing any upfront costs to build a project. But that would exhaust all the debt limit that we have. So that's the maximum we're talking about. So for that amount of money, we can probably build in maybe a 70-80 megawatt solar, standalone solar, or maybe half the size for a 4-hour battery. So that's just giving a scale, back of the envelope calculation. If we really want to get down this path, we need to have a financial advisor to study our bonding capability and do some real economic work and financial work to determine how much we can fund the project. So that could also be a limitation and consideration when we think about ownership. Any questions on this slide?
On the bonding capacity, is it the case that once the project's up and cash flowing, if you will, that capacity returns to us? Or is that really, we can only extend that far indefinitely?
Oh, I think that's true, but I'm not I wish Nick is here. I cannot answer that for sure, but I think if you start paying off, then your total debt is reduced and therefore you can probably borrow more, but I'm not 100% sure. That's more of a financing question. Other questions? Yeah.
How many megawatts did you say is the maximum?
Probably 70-80 megawatts, but that's only for, we're talking about EPC costs, right? There's soft costs, permitting costs, and other costs that's not really contemplated here.
Percentage of that is out currently.
So load is measured in terms of megawatt hour, so capacity, so our peak is 700 megawatts, to give you a scale. Yeah, about 7 megawatt peak. Probably less than that, but so if you do own solar is really not ideal to generate, but we have too much excess solar even in our portfolio right now. So you probably want to couple with a battery. Yeah. Okay. So then we'll talk about why we might want to own, the pros. The major economic factors, one is the tax-exempt financing that I mentioned about. It's a lower cost of capital compared to private entities. This instrument has always been a tool for local governments to fund capital projects. It's always been there, and we can still take advantage of it. So what's new is this IRA direct pay. So this means that PCE Peninsula can receive a tax credit directly from IRS up to the tax benefit maximum, depending on certain factors. It was not available to entities like PCE before the IRA was passed, but now it is. So that's great for us, but I do want to make a note that developers also benefit from tax credits, just like we do. It's just that we don't know if they're passing through 100% of it via PPA prices to us, so it's not fully transparent. It's 30% ITC. It's not that we get 30%, they don't. It's if we do it, we will know we get 30%, and we won't know if through their PPA price they are passing through all 30%. But there's also risk of us trying to qualify for ITC, as I'll talk about on the next slide. And there could be extended value meaning after the financing period, there could be residual value of this resource that doesn't require paying debt service, which means the only expense at that time, especially for solar and wind where there's no fuel cost, is O&M. So for the last period of the operating life of this resource, aside from major replacement that's required, you'd be benefiting from that value. And there could be other potential benefits, and those are really hard to quantify. One is the diversification, because we have all our contracts right now, all resources under contract. Having a resource that's owned perhaps will give us some benefits. And one of which is we might have flexibility in how to control it, how to operate it. And if we want to make any modification to this asset, we have to say, we don't have to go to a third party and say, can you change it for us? We can just do it, right? So that's intangible benefits. And it also promotes PCE's credibility and visibility as an owner of a resource to some extent. So those are the pros. The question is, are these enough to justify ownership? So then you have to look at the other side, which is the cons. So why not ownership? So this is a list of the potential risks. The first of all is development risk, right? You have to go through permitting, interconnection, you have to manage supply chain issues. And really the question is, can we do it better or more cost effectively than the developers? And what if the project fails and we'll have some cost, right? So this is a little different from owning a car because you don't have to build a car from scratch, right? And secondly, there's performance risk. So right now under the contract, there is a very buyer favorable term on performance, and there's performance security that if the resource we contract with do not perform, we'll get compensated for it, both on resource adequacy, capacity, and energy. But if we were to take ownership of these resources, these risks are on us, right? If the equipment fails, transformer fails, system outage, we can't deliver the power to the grid, weather doesn't turn out to be favorable to us, solar and wind. So can we live with limited protection and performance? There is manufacturer warranty on these equipments, but they are limited. They're not fully wrapped by a developer like we would under PPA. There's liability and reputational risks. You know, there could be safety issues, fire, security. It could be all covered by insurance, but then there's insurance premium. So can we afford to have a project failure or accident? Can we live with that? Right? That's a really good question. Then we need additional PCE staffing and resource to manage development work, to manage the O&M, to manage the financing work, which we don't currently do. And then there could be new additional compliance reporting that we need to do. So do we have the expertise? If we don't, then we have to either hire more people or we have to outsource. And then we have to manage multiple contractors as opposed to manage one PPA developer. So then you ask, if we subcontract everything out, then how is that better than just let the developer do it and contract it with under a PPA? And then there's decommissioning responsibility. Right now, we don't have that under the PPA. The developers will take that. But if we were to own it, we'll have to deal with the equipment after their end useful life. And it's really hard to say how much that's gonna cost depending on the project. And then there's finally financing and tax credit risk. We say we are able to bond finance. But then once we have debt, might impact our credit ratings. And then there's tax benefits that we can realize, but there's requirements to be able to realize the tax benefits, then we'll be taking on all that risk. So are we comfortable with taking on these financial risks? So those are the cons on the other side of the scale. So before I move to a summary slide, any questions on the cons? Yes.
I guess I'm just curious, I feel like, did those who were at Peninsula Clean Energy from the start have some form of this type of conversation at the beginning? And if so, you know, what may have changed, you know, on a high level to bring us back to this?
I'll answer that. We really didn't have this level of conversation because we had no money. And we now have upwards of $250 million in the bank. So and we have a run rate, right? We have both costs and revenue and a very robust history of that. So we have credit possibilities we didn't have. I mean, really significant ones. We, in the course of doing the Wright solar project, there were sort of some discussions about it, but frankly, we just weren't in a position to do it. And so the answer would be, we're in a different situation now. I would say also, over the last year, in the course of interviewing first COO, then CEO, then COO candidates, we interviewed quite a number of candidates who came from munis and had been around a long time. And every single one of them had much lower cost electricity for their customers, and it was 100% because they owned their assets. So that kind of motivated some conversation around this. We also have a strategic commitment to deploy 20 megawatts of power in our service territory. Now, not that we necessarily need to own, but that was always contemplated as a possibility. So,
Thank you.
Not 20 or 50?
20,
20, mistake.
could be 50.
And I'll add that the latest IRA benefit that we should directly benefit from the ITC without going through a private entity is also a game changer. That probably brings up this conversation for discussion, yeah.
Roy, just
Yes,
what I would call operational risk is actually number 2 of performance risk, correct?
Operational risk, yeah, performance risk, that's really the same.
Which is a big deal, right? It's a big deal if we own this thing. So
Yes.
just- Yeah.
Have we seen any other CCAs move in the direction of ownership?
Based on our research, we don't think other CCAs own any resource. MCE has MCE Solar One. They have, under PPA, they have a purchase option that, to our knowledge, that has not been executed yet. Maybe there's maybe someone knows about the microgrid project, that Redwood.
They don't own that.
They don't own that,
No.
okay, so probably no.
But I don't want to leave what I said about the munis hanging out there. There's a huge difference. They own the wires.
Yeah.
Right? We don't own the wires.
And
Yeah,
they were born like 15 years ago.
this is more.
Or more.
I'm trying to go back to that slide and try to explain what the munis own. They own a lot of these projects that we probably either don't want to own.
They're not the anchor tenant
Yeah.
that Roy described, but they're absolutely little pieces of these projects.
Yeah. Right, exactly. And a lot of them do own large hydro, like the Hoover Dam. But there's no contracting capability now. We can't just go in there, I want a piece. We're just late to that game as CCAs. So they do benefit from owning these large projects. And a lot of them have been financed already, so they're really benefiting from the no debt service, operating costs only mode of these resources that are really the cheapest resource in the market you can offer. So.
I mean, so that's, they own, they're benefiting because they bought this stuff 50 years ago.
Yes,
right?
exactly.
So we're wondering do we want to be in that position 50 years from now?
Right.
And so, kind of the top question in my mind is, how durable are these assets we'll be buying, right? Are these solar panels going to be obsolete in 25 years? And then also we're buying land, so there's that, land probably won't get less expensive, so.
That's exactly right. So the solar and wind, solar panels, probably 20-25 year life. Once your financing term is probably the same length, and once that's over, you probably have to replace all the panels anyways. So it probably do not make sense as compared to a large hydro resource that can stand there, the dam can stand there for many years. Yeah, but there's not another nuclear facility being built in California, there's not another Hoover Dam here to be built. So that it's just really limited opportunity for us to own these kind of resources now. Yes.
Roy, when you said joint ownership, are you talking about with an energy developer or are you talking about another CCA?
Another CCA so in the case of POUs, public owned utilities, is a joint POU group. Or in combination with an IOU, so it's all utilities, so all buyer, not seller.
Okay, and are you going to cover risks from the standpoint of a joint ownership? Or would you consider them to be the same?
Joint ownership definitely, I'll talk about that in a later slide, definitely provides risk sharing opportunity, but it depends on the partner that you choose to be in with. Because if they don't pay, you have to pay eventually. So yeah, gotta be, that's the risk of joint ownership, but if we believe in all the other CCAs or POUs that we partner with, then everybody commits to the project, then it's actually risk sharing, and you can reach an economy of scale, build a larger project and lower the cost. So yes, there's both sides to it.
You had mentioned microgrids and, I don't know, virtual power plants. Do they fit in this at all as a place to sort of buy, you know?
Let me, maybe can I answer that question a bit later after I go? Yeah,
please.
okay.
Yeah,
I have sort of a case study, not exactly the same, but I can talk about that when I get to that slide. Okay, so let's put it all together, right? Comparing ownership and versus long-term contract. That's ultimately what we're trying to get to. So before we get to the differences, let's talk about the common values. So no matter if you own or you contract, you get these things. One is you get the energy, you get capacity, which is resource adequacy if it's a long-term front of meter contract. You get the environmental attributes. You do use them to meet compliance one way or another. If it's a battery, you do get the arbitrage value, you get the shaping value of the battery. And most of the contracts we sign are new. And they both create jobs. We make sure that we have the prevailing wage language in our PPAs. So it's a really important attribute in our due diligence and also in our contracting negotiation that's in there. So these are the common values, no matter if you own the resource or you contract them, you get them, right? So here are the difference. The first three are really the benefit of ownership that we talked about, tax exempt financing, which ownership, if we own, we do get it. If we don't own, then in their long-term contracts, the private entities do not benefit from tax exempt financing, but prepay does take a piece of that advantage. And prepay, if you recall, is a separate discussion that Nick is leading, our CFO Nick is leading through the Audit and Finance Committee. So under a prepay structure, some of the tax exempt financing benefit can be realized by us without directly owning the assets. So I won't talk too much on prepay, just note that this is an option. So ITC PTC, again, if we own it, we can capture 100% of the benefit if we meet all the rules under IRS. We may not be getting 100%, we don't know that for sure through the PPA. And the extended value, we do get it under ownership. We don't get it under long-term contracts. After the contract's over, that resource goes back to the developer. Of course, they have to deal with the decommissioning, but we don't get any residual value out of it. So and then the rest will favor the long-term contracts, development costs and risk, that's on developer under contract, performance risk, that's on developer, liability risk, really is on developer. We probably have very limited liability risk in that case. We probably require less staffing and administrative cost under contracts than ownership. There's no financing costs and risk. That's all under the PPA, no O&M expenses and no decommissioning responsibility. So the first three are really the value and benefits of ownership, and the rest are favoring the long-term contracts. So here's my formula. Ownership results in cost saving if the green box, which is our cost and risk associated with ownership, minus what's in red, the economic value of ownership that we'll realize has to be less than the total contract cost under the contract, under the PPAs. So if that equation works, then it makes sense for us to own it. So What that means is we really have to look at each project and go through a very elaborate kind of pro forma analysis, economic analysis, to determine whether or not it's economical. So today's presentation is really qualitative, not quantitative. We're not assessing one individual project from a life cycle perspective. So this is just to give a general idea. Oh, question, okay, sorry, I should probably stop, yeah.
Then John, and let's put.
I mean, you're sort of alluding to it, but I mean, presumably if you take on risk, you substantially lower your costs. I mean, that's why, I mean, otherwise it's a crazy business, like if you're gonna take a lot of risk at the same cost, like you wouldn't do that. So can you give us just a rough sense for, and you know, this idea of munis, and I get they have wires and they were done 50 years ago, but there's still that idea that if you take on risk, you get benefit for taking on that risk. And this doesn't sort of capture that?
Yeah, I agree, it doesn't, because the cost, so if we think we can manage the supply chain better than developers, and we can get panels cheaper than developers, then it would make sense, but that's not the case. We probably don't have the relationship with the suppliers to be able to get those panels cheaper than developers do.
Well, that's one part of it, but the other part is by taking on risk, you typically get lower prices because you might have to pay, you just don't know. And that's different than volume discounts and the rest of the stuff. So do you have some way of characterizing that?
Yeah, I really don't think that applies here because the cost of building this facility, whether we do it or they do it, I don't think we can manage that cost better than they do.
Agreed, but they're gonna charge us.
A premium,
They're gonna charge us their cost plus that premium,
Yeah.
that premium is the risk premium.
that's right, and that is included in the total contract cost,
Right, but I guess
dollar
what I'm
per
asking is,
PPA.
what is that number roughly?
We don't know their margin. Unfortunately, they don't show us their books. I'm sure they're making money out of it. They have shareholders to serve. So, but what we look at is the total cost of the PPA, and that supposedly captures their margin. And if they can do that and believe that they can make money out of it and still contract with us at that price, then that's the price we care about, right?
Oh, I've got a couple other people first, so go ahead, John.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just observing in your ROI calculation here, you know, as we spoke on just a bit ago, I think the extended value is the wild card in that, right? And I personally would be very interested in understanding, you know, how you're gonna go about calculating that and what goes into that, because there's a lot of assumptions that I think would be very educational for me to understand, and some of them might be unknowable, so I'm just curious about all of that.
That's a very good point. So that's why on the very first slide, when I analyzed the traditional structures, these large scale projects, they have a lot of residual extended value because the financing term is limited. Then you have 50, 60 more years to go with these resources, then they generate a lot of benefits upside. But for solar and wind, we can calculate if compared to a PPA of 20 years, and we own this solar resource for 30 years, the back end 10 years, we can do a degradation calculation, see how much generation they provide, and then we can do probably a not very accurate forecast 20 years, 30 years from now from the market, and see what that value is, and to determine that extended value. It really depends on the technology itself.
But even beyond the equipment, I mean, we would be buying land, and I don't know, maybe land in proximity to grid becomes a scarce resource over time. So,
Sure.
You know, there's a lot of really long-term thinking and assumptions in this.
That's true. So site control and land cost is one piece of energy project development. And that's why a lot of projects are developed in the Mojave Desert where land cost is relatively cheaper. So one of the later slides also talk about if we can have the land for free to develop a project, that would be ideal for us to own, right? Because you don't have that cost up front. But you know, your statement is also true that if we actually buy this land and that land actually appreciates in value, then maybe that becomes an investment. But I'm not sure if we are in business buying land as opposed to owning generation assets. So that's something that we need to think about.
Yeah, Leslie?
I don't know how you would quantify, but I was just thinking about the value of control, so if we own it, we know we do a good job.
Yeah,
And then maybe we don't have to have access to as much extra generation, worry about resource adequacy, because we have confidence in our work, if that makes sense. But I don't know if that's something you quantify, or maybe that's just psychological.
it is a little bit, I think in the case of Rice Solar, I think Rick talked about is, we always want to put a battery there and the owner is resisting. If we were to own it ourselves, we probably have done it already. There's also challenges, on the interconnection side that takes time. But on the operational control, it depends. If it's an front of the meter application, it's the operation of that resource really is dictated by the ISO and the grid. Because you're getting the revenue for it, you have to follow their instructions. So you really don't have that much control, you think. But for a local project, then you have a lot more control. For example,
Clearly some dollar value.
I'm sorry.
There's clearly dollar value associated with if we had put batteries on right
Yes,
sooner.
yes.
Carlos.
Yeah, so I just wanted to point out that the economies of scale that are achievable by us pale in comparison to the top 10, right, producers of solar and energy, just pay, right?
Absolutely.
So those economies of scale create profit for folks, right? If we can't achieve that, then indeed utilizing or understanding, even if we were to get their books, right? We couldn't achieve those returns.
Yes.
Because we're never, a 70 watt, by the way, 70 watts may cost us $125 million. It's also gonna cost us a significant chunk of our equity. Because nobody, bonds just gives you money if you're not just into the game. And what does that mean? It means you may be putting in 20, 30%. You'll have to have some of your own cash, which right now we're using for other things, right? And it gives us a bonding capacity. So again, but by the way, thank you all very much. When you all met with the procurement committee, you really did listen to us. And you changed this presentation to actually reflect some of the concerns and questions. There was some reluctancy and you guys came back and actually said, here, this is what we can do today. And I think this makes it more transparent for us. And so, Sean and Roy and the other folks on that phone call, I mean, thank you very much for putting this together, because this is a much more cogent presentation that I think is less tendentious, actually. Because I think that other one was like, nah, you shouldn't do it at all, blah, 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 and I was on your side, but I think this does a better job. But anyway.
We might get there anyway.
And anyway, I did want to point that out. And the other thing is, when we do a financial analysis on this, we're not going to do return on investment. We're going to do an IRR, an internal rate of return, right? Because of the recycling of money that's coming in and out. So it's like, when does it come in to the actual cash flow, right? So it's a much more complex rate of return analysis, which we can do, and we probably hire out to do it, right? But I mean, this is the level of complexity here that is more than just a straight bond deal for a housing project.
Yeah, and we have to identify,
Yeah.
at least we have a skeleton of a project that we want to study.
Right.
Tim.
Yes.
Yeah. Some of these people get tired of my stories about my former lives, but one of those former lives involved being vice president of a traditional 30,000 megawatt utility. So I've kind of seen that world from the inside. I've worked at nuclear plants, I've worked at hydro plants, I've worked at, you name it. If you're not operating generating plants today, and you're talking about getting into the business of building and operating generating plants, you are talking about a completely different universe on all levels. So it's, I'm not saying you can't do it, but you need to be a completely different kind of company if you wanted to do that. And kind of similar to Carlos's comments, 200 million in bonding capacity for a lot of industries that would be great. In the utility world, that is a pittance. That you can't do very much with that. One of the things I did in the utility world is I had some liaison with utilities in foreign countries. And the way that a lot of those utilities work is the grid, the distribution grid, is owned by the national government. The generating plants are owned by private investors. And they hold hourly auctions for the grid to buy power from these privately owned generating plants. And they have laws in place to prevent gaming the system, you know. So in the really premier asset is the distribution grid. It's the connection to the customer. And they auction off the supply as a commodity. And the other thing in the utility world, a lot of those municipal utilities and others that have been built were built with government things like eminent domain. And that they use the power of government to acquire the land, to acquire the right of way, to do all of the stuff that only governments can do. So I would urge caution on this. I'm not saying we can't do it. If there is a play here, it might be in storage, not in generation. But you're talking about getting into a completely different universe than where you are today. That's it.
Thank you.
How many more do you have? About 5?
Yeah.
I think we're gonna address a lot of what you're saying. We're not quite done here yet.
Okay, so let's look at a couple, with that formula in mind and the pros and cons in mind, let's look at a few cases. And the first case is the large scale solar renewable storage, not within our service territory, large scale. We sole ownership. So our ownership analysis is this: the only major benefit is our access to tax exempt financing here, because there's really a tremendous amount of risk in development, performance, and liability, and will require a lot of staff and resources to manage the life cycle of this project. And there's really limited intangible benefits, improve our branding or things like that, because it's really not local. So our initial recommendation here is not to own such large renewable assets. We can probably take advantage of the renewable PPAs, which are designed for this purpose, to own them. And if we want to take advantage of the tax exempt financing, then we can consider prepay as an alternative. And then case 2 is joint ownership through CC Power is California Community Power. They're a group of 9 CCAs in Northern California, and they are actually going through a solicitation process to get pricing for ownership projects. And their model is, one, that they're joint ownership by multiple CCAs, and 2, they're doing this build transfer agreement, which means that the project ownership doesn't happen or transfer to the CCAs until the project is completed and ready to come online. In that case, it will be more like owning a built car rather than building a car from scratch, right? So that will remove a lot of development risk, and it will joint ownership shares risk. We talked about earlier, you have to pick the right partners, but if everybody's committed to that project, then you can help to achieve economy of scale, build a bigger project, and reduce the cost that way. And because you have that capability of pooling all the resources, you can contract for a resource that we can't contract alone, probably, like a compressed air or a pump storage that requires a lot of capital. So those resources will have additional special attributes and benefits associated with them. So the recommendation here is maybe, it really depends on the partner. It really depends on the project itself, whether it makes sense for us to own it or just contract it. So it can be done on a case-by-case basis.
And this would be analogous to the Northern California
Yes,
Power
indeed.
Association, the Southern California SCAPA, which is the public power version of what CC Power is to CCS.
And case 3 is custom-sited installations. That's really the GovPV program that we already have deployed. These are smaller scale projects that's behind a meter, serving customers located within our service territory. And we'll own it. We own these systems ourselves, solar plus storage. These projects are smaller in scale, so they come with very low development and performance risks, a relatively low resource required to manage them. They have very high and visible customer and community benefits. And also, because the customers are local governments, there's a very high repayment certainty from credible off-takers. So this is a very low-risk ownership model that we can learn a lot from. So the recommendation here is to continue to deploy these ownership programs on the behind the meter.
Just,
Programs.
do the common values also apply to, case 3?
So let's look at each one of them.
Okay.
Good question. Yeah, this common value slide applies primarily to supply side resources, but yes, so they do provide energy. Behind the meter now qualifies for low modification, so it does indirectly capture some resource adequacy benefits. I'm looking at Rafael now. Is that right? Got you off guard. Yeah. Yeah, and then they do provide renewable energy credits. May not be CEC certified, but there are environmental attributes. There are solar. I'm not sure, well, depending on what compliance are we talking about, there are many different types of compliance. I'm sure local distribution level projects also meet their own set of compliance requirements. If they build battery, there will be arbitrage for the customers. If utility takes control of these batteries, it will also help the utility, us, on shaping the arbitrage. It is new additionality, it does pre-job, so I would say 89% of it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
There's one more.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, they're missing a case. I changed the slide a little bit. So this ownership case is, what I call local project with unique advantages. And this is the 5 to 10 megawatt range within PCE service territory, depending on how it's configured. It could be behind the meter, or it can be in front of the meter. We own it solely. This could be the VPP microgrid, Greg, you were talking about, these type of projects. So I think for these projects, we need to look at, different attributes. If, we have grant funding, we have no cost land lease, we have CEQA exemption, we have expedited interconnection, we have very, in particular branding opportunity on the very unique project, and all other local benefits that we can show, ideally a combination of all of them, then I think it probably will make sense. So really the recommendation here is maybe we should look at a case by case basis and look at what kind of advantages and benefits we can take advantage of and put it together into a financial model and see if it makes sense. So that's really sort of a catch-all case on a local basis. On the staff level, we still don't think owning a project outside of our service territory makes a whole lot of sense. So we should probably focus on more local development. That's the case for it.
So would case 4 then include some design of a virtual power plant, which is obviously not behind the meter? Or likely is behind.
It could. And do you want to comment on that, Rafael?
All of our distributed efforts around storage will provide BPP type capabilities. We're building more sophistication over time. So the residential, for example, the residential solar and storage program that we ran with Sunrun does continue to provide basically BPP dispatch, and we have some contractual control over how the dispatches work. And looking down the road, we're looking at increasing that. So as government solar program gets into storage, then we'll be looking at dispatching those in a coordinated manner as well.
Okay, and that's my last slide here. So just to put it together, this is the ownership scale. So on one hand, we have these benefits, right? Tax exempt financing, ITC direct pay, any extended value, any tangible benefits. And on the other side of the scale is the costs and risks associated with ownership throughout the life cycle of the project, and including staff and the resource that's required. And our recommended next step is to continue to deploy GovPV ownership and collect lessons learned from owning these small scale projects first. We can assess joint ownership structure through the California Community Power Joint Ownership Solicitation. We can explore other local ownership opportunities, if there's any, and review their economics. And we can consider prepay opportunities to take advantage of exempt financing on these large scale projects, which is already in the works through other working groups and committees. So that's all. This last slide.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Yes.
Such a large part of this, and GovPD works so well for us. Could case number 4 be, instead of just with local government, that we partner with, we don't have to own the land, different buildings and utilizing their sites for advantages they would get in buying power from us, to set up a similar program that is with private property owners? Meaning commercial, not residential.
Right, so we, in our near term, and we have on our to-do list to come back to the board with the distributed energy resources plan, and we are working on that. Things that we already have on the roadmap include the residential solar and storage, GovPD, then we have other residential assets. So in fact, Alejandro didn't note this, but our long-term or medium-term plan really for the direct install program would be also to have VPP controls over things like thermostats and things like that. So we want to layer on additional capabilities over time. We have the aspiration to expand to other commercial sectors with some of these things, but nothing concrete yet on the roadmap.
It just seems like less risk and there's less of a problem with the distribution because it's already in place.
Yes, there are complexities for moving into the commercial sector. And one of what we want to do is make sure that we're clear on the building blocks and that they all work before we start expanding into other segments. I should flag that we also have our Flex Market program, which is a flexible incentive mechanism where contractors can work with commercial properties on load shaping. We're a step removed from that, but that is also in fact another way that we provide a type of VPP-like service.
Any other questions or comments? Mark.
I just wanted to thank staff. I mean, we've been just brought this up. We were talking about it at the conference and then here we are, you know, hearing about it. So this was really well done and I really appreciate, you know, the steps we're going to be going forward. And it's just great to see something that was thought out and we got it. And so thank you.
Great. Okay, let me see if there's any public comment. And Sean has it. And then we'll do any board member reports. I don't see any public comment in the room or online. Okay, we'll close public comment. Sean, you're on.
I just want to acknowledge Roy. Thank you for coming up. Professor Roy, he really is going to be a teacher someday, we're convinced. Do appreciate the questions, and this is a moment in time. So it could be that the assessment changes over time. So thank you for listening, and if there's a need to bring it back up again, we sure will. I meant to mention during my CEO report to remind you that there is a webinar tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Hopefully a bunch of your staff is attending to talk about our 2 new grant and loan programs for member agencies. There are 2 new web pages on our website under local governments where you can find the application, the guidelines, the rules, etc. So all of that is live tonight and then will be rolled out tomorrow. And we expect a smooth, expeditious way to get these funds out to you. So thank you.
Okay.
To you.
Board member reports. I'll give one. We, as members of our city councils and board of supervisors, periodically approve building, planning, and engineering fees, right? I mean, maybe we do it once a year, maybe we do it once every 5 years, but this is a big task. And when particularly the values of property go up, it changes the fees, and this is something that all of us take seriously. Atherton is in the process of doing that, and we approved a fee structure that says for all plumbing, mechanical, and electrical permits, whether they're building or planning, if they are identified as green, there'll be no cost. And the ones that are obviously green are solar panels or batteries, but there's a whole series of other things that staff is charged with specifically identifying that enable electrification. So very much in connection with the presentation that we had tonight about what PCE is doing to advance electrification, all of us in our city councils can support that, because obviously it's a cost issue for our residents and our businesses. And to the extent that we can manage some of that cost by reducing those fees, it's a good thing. So I just wanted to let you know, look at that electrical, mechanical, and plumbing little piece, which tends to float by all of us without ever being really focused on. Anyone else? Yes, Leslie.
I'm gonna watch the webinar recorded because of.
Yes, we will
Harvard.
record it.
But just wondering if that is something that one of these grants could go toward to subsidize fee reductions or fee forgiveness for grant programs.
It probably could, so we'll hear more about this tomorrow. The one thing, we want it to pay for projects, not necessarily for money to go back out to some other party, right? So it's really meant for city projects. It's not meant to pay for staff or sort of soft costs. So probably, but TBD.
Yes.
So it might be helpful if you could forward that that fee structure to us here. Just so I could slide it by staff and see what they think.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. Anyone else?
I would just say you're stuck with one more meeting. And we're glad for that.
Okay, we'll see you all next month.
All right, thanks, everybody.